Yes. All right, guys. Welcome to our next episode on Real Talk, powered by Vealing. Today we have Ellen Hopkins with us today. She is the most talented author I have ever personally read. Ellen has made a profound impact on the literacy world, especially in young adults fiction. Her best-selling novels, such as Crank, the series, and Impulse, has resonated deeply with readers, tackling tough topics like addiction, identity, and raw honesty. Ellen has established herself as a voice for communities and a champion of hope and healing. Today, we're honored to have Ellen state her insights, her experiences, and her creative process with us. So let's give her a warm welcome. And like I said, I appreciate you being here so much. It's definitely a big dream for me. So I'm very, very thankful for you.
Uh,
The first question I had for you today, what inspired you to become an author?
Oh, well, that's way back. That goes way back to my mom. So my mom was like a big proponent of, she loved books, she loved poetry, she loved classic literature. She had me reading before I hit kindergarten, I was reading chapter books, so I was an early avid reader. And generally, early avid readers become writers at some point because eventually we'll read something and go, man, I could do better than that. So I guess just by that, by reading. Also, I guess I started writing like when I was little. And so I published my first haiku when I was 9 years old. Saw
Oh,
my name
wow.
in print at 9, and I'm like, okay, I'm an author. That's it. That's what I'm gonna be.
That's what you're gonna do. That is awesome. 9 years old. That is really, really cool.
It took me a while to get here, though. You know what I'm saying? It didn't
Yeah.
like happen overnight. Exactly.
Um, how do you come up with the ideas for your stories?
So, on the YA level, I mean, I've raised now three generations of teens. I still have a 16-year-old grandson in the house that we're raising full time. And so I'm intimately aware of the things that touch young lives, the good and the bad, things that their lives encompass. And I just hoped I wanted to be able to bring some perspective into kind of that narrow teen space. Teens have lived, 16, 18 years, whatever, and I've lived a lot longer than that. So I've been able to see outcomes to choices that you make as teens. I mean, I made quite a few bad ones myself along the way. So
Yeah.
hopefully I can help young people, especially look at situations they're going to be presented with and make better choices as far as which direction to go. That's always been my goal.
Okay, yeah, that's something I definitely can understand. And reading your books, like I'm 37, and I think I started reading your books when I was 17, maybe a little younger. And I remember reading Crank, Glass, Impulse, Identical, and those are the books. I mean, your writing style, one, is what gets me. It's just poetic. It's beautiful, and it's so hard to put down your books. I've literally, I think, have read every book that you've wrote in one day. And my mom's like, "Hey, you got to go to sleep. You got school in the morning." I'm like, "All right, mom, I'm almost done. I'm almost done." So that's something I think that is really, powerful to readers, especially young adults and teens, because some of the things that, that you talk about in your books are so honest that, you don't hear it from other people. It's almost taboo. And then when you read your books, you're like, oh, wow, like, I can relate to this person because I am going through this, or I have been presented with this situation. And I didn't really know what to turn to. So I feel like in any part of your books, when someone reads them, that there's something that you can always, connect with personally. I feel like it takes someone really talented to be able to do that through a book. And I've read, like I said, every single book. And then your one book that came out August, I got it right here. um, was definitely one of my favorites. I think the storyline with Storm and Lake was amazing. Um, and I was going to ask you about that book. How did you develop the characters that you came up with?
So Sync, which is about twins, they're separated as young kids by the foster care system, and and it follows each of them through separate placements and then how they kind of weave their way back to each other. So it's like over the years, I've worked with a lot of foster kids. I've worked with a lot of aged out foster kids, and so I've heard the stories. I know what foster is like. There's good and bad. You know, it's not all bad, but there is some bad, and there are champions within that system. And also, this book touches on the juvenile justice system because one of the twins ends up in lockup a couple times. And it's the same with that system. And I've worked with kids in juvenile justice, you know, writing their own stories, telling their own stories, and hearing the things that they go through. I needed to be able to represent that fairly. And
Right.
so I just kind of like, I take in the stories and then I create the characters. I build the characters out of the stories that I've heard. That's why, you know, my characters read really real because they are all inspired by not necessarily one real person, but, you know, in this case, several real people. So those storylines that you read in Sync have all happened to some kid in foster somewhere that I know.
Oh wow. So that's pretty touching because I know that book. I don't want to give it away too much because I want people to really go out there and read it. I did the foster and parent, so I was on the other end when I was reading some of this stuff. I was like, man, I would have loved to have a case manager that cared that much, for some of the kids. And that in the book, for one of the twins, the case manager is really good. And I was like, I've had kids in my home where the case manager, you couldn't get a hold of them no matter what, so I mean, it's definitely a tough field, but like I said, with every book that I've read from you, there's some type of relatable experience, and that's so. When I was reading, I was like, man, like this is one of the best books I've ever read, and it was just so touching, and what they both went through. That you were able to come up with that and interact the way the interaction went through the whole book, the flow. I mean, it was so amazing. It's definitely one of my favorites, and I tell everybody about it. I even told my mom. I'm like, Mom, I know, it's like adult, like young adult, other, but you have to read this book. It is so good. And she was like, okay, like when you come over, bring it, because my mom, she knows I love to read. So I'm trying to get her to, read what I read. But when writing this book, were there any specific challenges for you?
The biggest challenge for me right now is this whole book banning stuff that's going on. It's you know, most of my books, there are parts of the country where you are not allowed to have them in school libraries and in some places in public libraries, which to me that's a real travesty because there are kids that need them. I wrote them for the kids that need them, and there are kids who won't find them that need them. So when writing Sync, I mean, I had to keep myself from self-censoring, you know, because it's the things that it's the kind of content that the harder content in that book is the stuff that's, you know, getting them removed from some
Yeah,
libraries and stuff. So for me, it was like not making myself dial it back. You know, I had to make sure that I kept it real, and that's the hard part. You know, and these adults that are banning books, they don't like the content, but what the real problem is, they don't like what's being represented, and that's what they should be fighting against, not the
right.
books that represent it, the things that are inside those books that are difficult for young people to face, you know. I mean, and they hit some tough stuff.
Yeah,
So, you know, instead of banning books, let's try to like ban the behaviors, you know.
right. Yeah, no, I honestly, I was, talking about you to some people, and I was reading some articles, and then I saw the book banning, and I was just telling, my wife, I was like, I just read that, like, I don't know how, how updated it is. I was like, but do you know that they're trying to get her books taken out of, libraries and, different schools and stuff? Because I know when I personally go to the library, like I look for your books or stuff, and I've noticed like I couldn't find them. But the bookstore up the street, they sell them. So, but yeah, so it's been a pleasure. As far as being able to find them, I know sometimes it can be difficult.
Yeah, big dogs. Oh, and I need that FedEx. Can you sign that FedEx?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My dogs do not like the FedEx person.
No, you're good.
It's like,
No, you're good.
I'm busy, dogs.
They just want to talk to. I got four cats in here, but I got my little logo. If I didn't have the logo up, you'd be like, oh my goodness, they're all around me. So I get it. Um, but yeah, like I said, I didn't know the banning. You know, it's crazy to me that they are trying to take stuff like that away because kids need to be able to read something, or like even with music, there's music that they're trying to ban, and I think it's just so important that like with you, that people do read your books. I worked at a foster placement where there's like 30 kids. And when I was reading your book, I was like, man, I would have done anything to know about this book and be able to be like, hey, read this. Like, it does bring hope. It does bring, the reality of the situation sometimes in your books. And even if it doesn't always turn out perfect, it turns out the way it's supposed to be. I feel like you don't sugarcoat anything to make a fairy tale. I feel like you really are a raw author, and I think that's amazing because I don't think there's a lot of raw authors out there, and especially for teens. So I think the banning of the books is awful. I really don't understand it. I think your book should be everywhere.
Well, this is a wave of book banning. It's been about 2 years now, and it's a political movement. This is not about trying to help the kids. This is about trying to hurt public school education. That's what this move is. And books are the low-hanging fruit. They're the easiest thing to attack,
Mhm.
And so, and if they can remove, a lot of the removal stuff is they want to remove LGBTQ content. They want to remove like content by and about people of color. They're trying to push populations back into their closets basically, and
Right,
so it's not even just about the books, it's about the people the books represent. And so, and that again, this is a travesty. This is anti-First Amendment. This is against what we stand for as a country, and certainly what I stand for as an author, which is every person's right to read the book that matters to them. And
right,
no other person should be able to tell me what my kids can read. They
right,
could, you take care of what your kids read. Let me decide what my kids can read. And I've never
right.
censored anything my kids could read. I don't know that they all turned out the best, but I don't think the books did anything to
Right.
whatever their
No,
lives did.
no, I feel like your books would I feel like it would just touch more people, than do harm. I mean, I feel like, like I said, I think it's so important, kids, if, when you talk to kids and stuff, their number one thing is they feel like adults aren't real with them, or they feel like they can't talk about certain things or issues. Um, and with your books, you're putting the issues out there. And, I even mentioned, your books to some of my groups that I've ran before, and they were like, that book touched me. Like I was dealing with this for so long, and I read that book and it literally changed my life. And I hear that a lot about your books. And I remember thinking, yeah, I feel you, because when I was young reading them, I was like, wow, like, I didn't know that someone could relate so well with me in a book. So I think that's really important. And, it is a shame for the book banning, but like you said, it's easier to attack the books. And, unfortunately, that's just how it is. But that's why I'm glad I have you on here. V-Link does a lot with kids and things like that. So, we're just trying to get your name out there as well. Like, hey, if you're going through this, read a book. I mean, reading is so important, and you'd be surprised you just read a book and how you can connect with it. So, um, speaking of connecting and you being an author, was there any authors when you were growing up that felt connected to, or that influenced you to be, your writing or anything like that?
Like the ones that influenced my writing more would have been like, so I was kind of drawn to quirky writers like Ken Kesey, who did One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Mm.
Um, Amazing, very, again, he's very he gets the heart of humanity. John Irving, who does really quirky characters. Like he's a kind of a little bit crazy, I think, probably, but I loved his kind of weird, quirky characters. And I was a big Stephen King fan. And so, you
Yeah,
take real people and you put them in creepy, weird situations. And I mean, Stephen King is like the master of that. Like, and that's what I loved about him, is like his characters read real, even though they were, faced with these whatever monsters, clowns, whatever they were being faced with, but they were real people. And I think creating characters that feel like real people, no matter the situations they're put in. That's the key to like for me to like what good books are is like characters that read real that we can relate to, even if we're not anything like them, or
Right.
if we are like them. So for both, and I think
Yeah.
that's what I want people that aren't going through the stuff I write about also to develop some understanding of the people who are. So to build empathy and understanding about people that are different than you, I think that's vital to being humans. We need to come back to, and what's lacking in this country now, what's really scary now is we've been divided so successfully by politicians and people that have their own self-interests at heart. But we're forgetting that we're more alike as humans than not. So we
Right.
need to return to humanity, to our heart, instead of our brain that's like telling us, "Bah." Let's
Mm-mm.
get back to our hearts, and like what's important to most of us, to all of us, is love. And if we can tap into that space where we want to love and to be loved, and that's basic stuff, and that's what
Right.
we have to get back to. Finding love.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think you're right. I think, like you said, we need to tap back into, taking care of each other, and, instead of, trying to hurt each other and take each other down, we need to practice empowerment and lifting each other up, especially in times like this, where, suicide has become, so frequent these days, and it's awful. And, we just need to look after each other with like the bullying and, I don't think kids and, even adults realize how much damage, one thing you could say to somebody that really turns their whole life around. You can be mean one day and call someone fat and they have an eating disorder for the next 10 years, or, just anything that, can hurt somebody people don't realize that the damage they do sometimes. And, that's what I like about, your stories and your books is that when you read them, when a character does mess up or when a character is harsh, they go through it in their mind and then they come out of it and they're like, maybe I shouldn't have, did it this way. Or, like with Sync, that book with them going back and forth and then with the rape and everything, like it was just so touching, the brother and sister that they had that connection, even being separated. And I just think that's amazing how they kind of just always was in tune with each other and just never gave up. And I think that's a big thing these days that you got to keep pushing, kind of don't give up. I mean, it's all about their times are bad, but you kind of have to learn how to deal with the cards that you're presented with the best way you can. And I think a lot of your books show that yeah, it can go this way, but look how awesome it can be this way too. So,
Right. And that you can make it through the bad stuff and come out on the other side. And you have to find the way for the bad stuff. And nobody's life is perfect.
right,
Everybody's going to go through bad stuff somewhere. You have to figure out how to get through the bad stuff and come out stronger on the other end rather than weaker. And it's really important to keep building the strength within ourselves to be able to find the resilience to like get through the bad times, because we will. We're all going to go through some bad times. And
right,
but there's always hope on the other end. There's always light after the darkness. That's, I want to convince my readers that, you can make it through and you can still come out and be okay. You can still find love on the far side of the bad stuff. And you're worthy. You're worthy of,
yeah,
of not only survival, but love on the far side. Because we are all worthy of our being here, and we need
right.
to know that.
And I know there's been a lot of talk, and I know when I was talking to kids and stuff, and we were talking about your books, a question came up, and they were like, "What book do you think she would make a movie if she could? If somebody approached you and was like, hey, out of all your books, which one would you choose to be a movie? And would there be any like specific actors or actresses you would want to do your movie?"
Right. So the only one so I've got 15 young adult books now. I've got two middle grade books, and I've got four novels for adults, right?
Hmm.
The only one that has been optioned was Crank, and we were all the way into as far as like, because I had script approval through the option. Um, and we were all the way into, we had a script, we had a director, we were working on cast, and then COVID hit. And then so everything just went shut down, and the producer has not decided to go back to the project yet. I mean, I do think Crank would be an important one for sure, but I think actually Sync would be an amazing movie because it's got
I
great adult actors, it's got great young adult actors, you know, and hey, I'll be the mom. Whatever. No, I wouldn't want to do that. I'm too old to play in movies at this point. They'd have to do plastic surgery first.
no, no.
No, I do. I think Sync would be actually a great one. There's as far as like just like a thriller kind of movie, a couple of my adult books that it's Love Lies Beneath and A Sin Such as This that are like sequels. They would make like a great kind of adult kind of thriller movie, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think, well, I personally think all the books could be movies because I think they're so awesome. But I think Sync, I think you're correct. I think Sync would be an amazing book, and Crank is an important one as well. I think that that series would be an amazing movie series as well. Um, I was going to ask you something else about Sync. Oh, I was going to ask you because I know when we talked, we were emailing. You said you had a lot of, you were pretty busy this year, so I do appreciate you taking the time to sit with us today. Do you have any upcoming projects or any books that you're writing on now?
Oh, I'm always so right now I'm doing another middle grade. So my middle grade novels are reach kind of a little bit younger audiences, but we're still talking like 12 and up
Hmm.
because they're still kind of hard-hitting subject matter, even though they're written without all that book banning content, no cuss words, whatever. This one's about a girl who's adopted and trying to, you know, identity is hard enough to figure out when you're a 13-year-old adolescent, but when you're adopted and have no information, because I was adopted, so I know that, you know, and
Wow.
I've adopted too. So I know the questions. I know this reaching out for identity when you're not quite sure where you came from or you know why you are how you are. So that's what I'm writing now. I'm going to go back to, I wrote a book called Sanctuary Highway. It was a YA. It was 3 years of my life. It was a really important book. It was where I saw the country going after the first Trump election, where we could end up, which by the way we're getting closer to now with his promises of what he might do now. The problem with that book was there were characters of color, and you know, there's kind of a resistance toward white authors writing characters of color. So that book, they chose not to publish it, but I'm going to change it now. I've got it figured out how to do it and be able to keep going with that book. And then I've got one I want to write, and I'm not sure if it'll be YA or adult, but I want to really look at this idea of seeking something bigger, but not through religion. Like really looking for, you know, that next level, like what heaven might be without, you know, an active God involved. You know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah.
it'll be a woo-woo book, but and I've got it pretty kind of figured out. So that I'll look into doing that. And that's going to be an interesting project for me because it'll be a bit of a departure, but not too far.
Okay. And how long does it normally take you? I know you said that one book was 3 years of your life. But how long does it usually take you to write a book?
I
Like just
usually write them in about 6 months, like from
six
start
months?
to finish. Yeah, and
Okay.
that one was 3 years because I had to rewrite it, and there was a sensitivity read, and I wrote it originally in prose, and then they wanted it in verse, so I had to change it into verse. So it was like three big revisions, which is why it was 3 years. You know,
Oh,
the first writing system it takes you, I mean, for sure less than a year, but usually about six months of solid
oh,
writing.
that's not bad. I figured they would take like years. I mean, they take me one night to read, but I mean, I'm like, I know they gotta take forever to write. But I love your style. A lot of people, like I said, it's very poetic. It's not, the normal left to right. It's just the way it breaks down, and I think it makes it a lot easier to read. That way. What inspired you to be that type of writer, like where you write kind of like a poet?
So it's called verse novel, and I was one of the few people that was doing it. Like when I started Crank, that was 20 years ago, which
Yeah.
it's hard to believe it's been that long, but there was only like one other person writing verse novel. And verse novel, for people that don't know, it doesn't read, it's narrative verse, so it still tells a story. There's still characters, there's still dialogue. It's not just poetry, but it is broken down like poetry. So fewer words on the page, a lot of word choice to make impactful images with fewer words. And the power of that is for people that don't read as well or don't like big blocks of text. You can come in and still get the power of story, but with fewer words on the page, word
Right.
placement. And I was a poet before I started writing novels, and I was
Wow.
a freelance journalist before that. I also wrote 20 nonfiction books before I dived into fiction. So I've been writing a long time, and it was just coming to where I belonged as a writer, as a fiction writer, and melding my poetry background with fiction. Just it worked really well. And Crank was the first, and to really be able to and Crank, which deals with, meth addiction, the idea of being able to put words on the page, like when she's using, the words are really scattered, like her thoughts are
Yeah.
scattered. And when she cleans up a little bit, everything comes back together, so the verses are more together. And it worked really well for that. So thinking about, word placement and musicality and rhythm, and how there'll be longer passages if it's like a more thoughtful section, and if it's like a faster section they'll be shorter and shorter, and it's just it's a rhythm thing. That's what it is, and it's a challenge. It's actually not easier than just writing in prose. It kind of probably looks like it's easier because of the fewer words, but it's not, because you really have to be thoughtful about which ones you use and what they mean within a scene.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what, when I read Crank, that was my first book. And I loved that you did that when she was using, like, it would be like, you just, and then you can, I feel like it creates a better image in your head, like with the characters and the surrounding, because, not that other type of books don't do that, and authors, because I can read other people's books and I have that image, but with your books, it's almost like you're right there, like you just feel it. And I think that's the craziest thing. I remember reading Crank and I was just like, I was so like tense, and like when she was using, I was like, oh man, like, no, I don't want nothing bad to happen to her, and it's just like, you really, I think with that style of writing, like it really becomes like, I feel like you almost become more involved, and
Right.
you kind of feel like you can create a better image um, with that. I think, because you have to, picture the characters and the situations in your mind. And with your books, I feel like it's so much easier to do just because of your style of writing and the way you describe situations and things like that. I think it's amazing. Like I said, you've been my all-time favorite author since I was young. I know I've preached about your books to millions of people, and you know, um, so I do appreciate, like I said, you just in general as an author. I think that you do amazing things. I don't really care about the band. I think your books should be everywhere. I think they can help a lot of people, and I was telling, some of my coworkers about Sync, and I was like, man, think about if they just had these books, because there's foster homes where there's about, 12 to 13 kids, and they're all just there, either wait to be, aged out, or, some of them are from juvie hall and they don't want to, fill up the juvie center. And so they'll be there. And I was, I worked in a place like that for years. And I was like, man, if this book was available back then, like, I was like, it would have touched so many more people. And I talked to kids that that I did, uh, was in the place that I used to work at. I'm like, hey, read this book, because they do feel hopeless, and they do feel, like it's never going to get better or they're not good enough. And then when you read that book, you can start to see where both of them start to have better self-worth, or they start to feel like, oh, I am loved, and that's powerful to me. That's one of the most powerful messages, I think, to get out there. And I think that's the whole tapping in, and trying to show people, they just want love, and most people just want to be accepted for who they are and not judged. And I think that your book shows a lot of that. And I think that's why, a lot of people really admire your books and you in general as an author, because it's amazing to have somebody who can just cut down and be so real, and raw. And you don't get that in a lot of books. So, I'm grateful for it. And I know a lot of people that, I talked to, when I told them I was going to get to meet you, they were like, "Oh, I'm so jealous." And I'm like, "Well, the podcast will be on there. You can see the podcast." I was like, "But, because they're a lot of people, they don't, authors, I think sometimes get put, they don't realize how many people they touch. And it's just like everybody that I talk to loves you. And they're like, man, she was my favorite author growing up, and she's still writing, and I love her books. And I think it's funny, like the books that I get are in the young adult section, and I'm 37, and I'll be checking out, and the lady's just looking at me. I'm like, what? It's a great book. I was like, she's a great author. I was like, I've been reading her since I was 17. So, I really admire you, and I'm really grateful for the work that you do. And I'm really grateful that you took the time to come on our podcast. It's kind of a newer podcast, and we deal with a lot of teens that are struggling. And we have a suicide crisis line to where we help people, and we help people with resources, trying to get them shelter. People who are on drugs, try to get them help. Just anything that we can do to help them. And a lot of people that call us with crisis, just try to help them. And I think, it's kind of the same work. You do that through your books, and you may not realize it, but I know that you've definitely saved a lot of lives and helped a lot of people. So I'm grateful for that, and grateful just in general for you and your writing, and you not getting giving up or backing down, because that's what we need. We need a strong author that's like, you know what, I'm going to write this anyway, and I don't care what they say.
And at this point, I don't feel like I have a choice. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I kind of jumped in the deep end, and I got to keep swimming.
Yeah, yeah, because it wouldn't be Ellen Hopkins book if there wasn't a cuss word or two, or somebody on meth or something.
It
That's
wouldn't be my house if there wasn't a cuss word.
yeah, but no, your books are amazing. And like I said again, I'm so appreciative that you were able to come on today. I don't want to hold you up too long. I know you're busy. You're going to write us some great books. We're going to be looking forward to. So I again, I thank you. It was a dream come true for me. I mean, I was like, oh, let me see if she'll write back. So I was really thrilled to hear from you, and I'm really thankful that you took the time today to just be here and to tell us a little bit about your style and your writing and how you get your characters. I know that's been a lot of people that ask. They're like, I wonder how she comes up with her characters. So I'm glad we were able to ask you that question and get the answer. And I really appreciate everything.
Well, and thank you for the work you're doing. It's hard work, it can get, you can start to feel a little bit of despair, and then you just gotta like get through that too, because we just like I do as the author, you guys are taking on the weight of some of the people that you're helping, and it's part of what you're doing, and it's hard work, it's a hard job, and so I appreciate what you're doing too.
Well, I appreciate that. And hopefully we'll be doing this again soon. Maybe when your next book comes out, we'll have you come back if you want. And I'm excited, to read your stuff that's going to come out, soon, maybe in a year or so. I'll be looking for it.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Thank you. You have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye. All right, guys. Well, that's going to be about the end of our podcast today. That was Ellen Hopkins. Please check her out if you haven't. She has a bunch of amazing books that are really good, and like I said, I've related to a lot of them. And I hope you can read them and relate. And her information's on the back of her books. She's always will write you back. I think it's ellenhopkinsbooks.com for her books, and then ellenhopkinsauthor@gmail.com. You could reach out, if you want to, and just give her, a praise, or just ask her any questions that you want if we didn't cover everything that you wanted to cover today. But again, thank you for tuning in at Real Talk, powered by VLink, where there's no filters, no fluff, just real talk. All right. Bye, guys.